Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for joining us today to talk about the new Denago eXC1 and eXC2 electric mountain bikes. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. Denago has some exciting new mountain bikes or eMTBs to share with you today. And we appreciate you popping in. We're going to be taking your questions and comments. We'll get to all of those at the end of the stream. If you're watching on social media, like Facebook or LinkedIn, you can drop your comment in on the live stream and we'll be able to pick up your question or your comment and do our best to answer it. So I'm Justin Christopher. I head up e-commerce and marketing for Denago eBikes, and joining me today is Brian Holdt. Brian is our special guest expert for this stream, and he's the owner of Airline Cycles, a Denago dealer in Connecticut, and one of the first Denago e-bikes dealers in the United States, actually, going back a long way. Brian, you want to take a moment to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your shop?
Absolutely. My shop's called Airline Cycles. I'm about a block away from the Airline Trail, which is a 60-mile stretch of rails to trails, beautiful bike path going through the pretty quiet eastern half of Connecticut. Been in and out of bike shops my whole life, and relatively new to the e-bike world, and really excited about this new lineup from Denago. We've had great success with the more recreational side of the Denago e-bikes, and just tremendously excited to have a more off-road ready version of the bikes ready to get a whole bunch of people out there enjoying nature, enjoying some trails with a little bit of electrical assist. Thank you, Justin.
You bet. I can see our viewer count going up. It takes a little while for people to get those notifications. So if you're just popping in, thank you for joining us. We were just doing some quick introductions. On the other end, where you are watching, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., we would love it if you would just drop a comment in and let us know where you are watching from and what type of riding you are currently doing. And if you already own a Denago e-bike, drop that in the chat too. We would love to be able to recognize you during the live stream. So we're going to be sharing some action photos and some video with you today. And our new eXC1 and 2 bikes are pretty different from the bikes that Denago has currently had on the market, which are mostly designed for, paved surfaces or maybe smoother gravel roads. These new mountain bikes are really designed for more aggressive riding in true off-road trail conditions. So we've got a video that we put together to show you kind of what these bikes are all about. So let's take a look at that now. All right, so that video was actually shot at one of my local trail systems, Marshall Canyon in Laverne, California. And one of the reasons I'm personally so excited about these new bike models is because it's the type of riding that I personally enjoy, right? So these are true mountain bikes that are capable of riding on those twisting, turning, off-road trails, steep uphill, downhills, and the designs that we're using for those conditions are mid-drive motors. These are Denago's first mid-drive motor mountain bikes with torque sensors. And they're also our first class 1 e-bike models. And we'll talk a little bit about what class 1 e-bikes are and how those compare to the class 2 and 3 e-bikes that Denago has already had on the market. So these models both use Bafang motors, displays, and lithium-ion batteries. They use the 29-inch wheel size and tire size. That's a larger diameter wheel and tire than mountain bikes have used in the past, which makes them easier to roll over obstacles in those challenging trail conditions. Unlike a lot of competing bikes, these come in 3 different frame sizes, so you can really customize and suit the rider conditions, and we have some photos to share with you uh, that show the range of riders that can work on these new models. And most importantly, these are bikes that are 20-mile-an-hour maximum speed on pedal assist, and they do not have throttles. So a lot of the Denago e-bikes that are already on the market are equipped with throttles that the user can use, right? 2 primary drive modes for e-bikes: pedal assist, where you decide how much help you want. The electric motor turns on and gives you a boost to go faster and further while you are pedaling. And throttle operation, right? You press a button or you twist a throttle, and the motor moves the bike on its own without your pedaling input. These new models do not have throttles, and we'll talk about why that is. All right, so first up is the eXC1. This comes in at a list price of $27.49. It's using the Bafang M410 motor and a 499 watt hour battery. And when we talk about the battery and watt hours, you can kind of think of that as like the size of your fuel tank, right? How fast and how far can I go? If you've got a larger fuel tank, you can do longer off-road rides in between charges. These bikes both come with Suntour front suspension forks. And the eXC1 is going to be our starting point for a value-oriented rider, right? Somebody who's looking for a high-quality mountain bike that's really worthy of riding on real off-road trails, not just something that sort of looks like an off-road mountain bike, but actually a shop-quality e-bike that is maintainable and serviceable and will stand up to that type of riding. Brian, this could be a great spot for you to jump in and tell us a little bit about some of the other bikes that you sell at Airline Cycles. But e-bikes, especially the off-road type, can commonly sell for $6, $8, $10, $12,000. If you wanted to, you can buy a $12,000 off-road e-bike. So maybe talk a little bit about why these are a great entry point that kind of hasn't existed on the market before for somebody that wants to get into off-road riding.
Thank you, Justin. It's true. The market for e-bikes and the options that are currently on the market are it's a pretty wide range. We had something that was a bicycle shaped object from Amazon that was $350 in the shop the other day. It barely functioned in any way, and I certainly wouldn't trust it to get me down the block, let alone not burn my house down. And last year we sold an e-bike model for $15,000. So it's a huge, huge range. And really the big thing is consumers are looking for quality and they're looking for reliability, which the reliability is something that so many brands just don't have. We see people all over the planet that are importing crates and big shipping containers full of e-bikes that they bought from some unknown overseas supplier. They get their name printed on them, but there's no reliability. There's no warranty. There's nobody to call if you need support. And that's really where the reliability of this option really makes it shine. Denago has a pretty incredible customer service and warranty department. We've really been blown away by the quality of service we've gotten from Denago in a time when we've had to drop other brands because their warranty and their service was just so poor.
Yeah, thanks for the nice words. When we're talking about stream crossings and mud and challenging uphills and downhills and rocky, rooty trail systems, which I know you have a lot back on the East Coast, right? Pretty different style from the California riding.
Absolutely.
Those types of riding conditions take a toll on any bike that's ridden on those type of trails. And if you want to get into that type of riding, we want to encourage you to get something that is serviceable and maintainable, right? And that means availability of parts. And then the other thing to consider is that standard non-proprietary components, right? So I can do upgrades or change components on the bike to sort of make it fit my needs better or make it fit my body better. And we're proud with these Denago off-road e-bikes that they use sort of industry standard components across the line, which makes them upgradable. So as your skills grow and your riding abilities grow, the bike can sort of scale along with you. On screen here, I have the eXC1 with a lifelong friend of mine, Wilt. And I wanted to bring up this photo because it illustrates the range of sizes that these bikes are going to come in. Brian, you're a big guy, 6'3", 6'2"?
6'4", actually.
6'4". So, at the top end of the range, somebody like Brian is going to be able to ride our extra large model and still have the right handlebar height and the right saddle height. Wilt in the photo here is between 5'6" and 5'7". And he's shown here riding the medium, which is the smallest of the three sizes. So we're pretty pleased about the way you're going to be able to get the right size and still have enough standover clearance over that top tube, for these more challenging off-road conditions. So here's the eXC2 model. You step up to list price of $31.99, and you're getting some upgrades with this guy. You're getting a Bafang M510 mid-drive motor that produces a little bit more torque than the 410 model found on the eXC1. You're getting a much larger battery. So if we come back to that concept of the fuel tank, right, significantly more juice in the tank for somebody that wants to go explore off-road and do all-day multi-hour rides and still be able to get back to the trailhead without running out of battery. Boost spacing suspension fork, Brian. That might be a great time for you to jump in. What is boost spacing? Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So boost spacing is something that entered the industry a handful of years ago. We found that riders were putting a lot more torque in the front wheel with riding more challenging terrain, going to bike parks. And the flexibility of that front wheel and the torque that was being put on the front wheel was really pretty significant. So the industry moved to a little bit wider front axle. Rather than having a 100 millimeter wide axle, they bumped up to a 110 millimeter axle with a much wider hub and a through axle, a nice beefy through axle rather than a thin little quick release. That just stiffened up the whole front end and really lets the bike track exactly where you need it to go and really behave and handle whatever sort of terrain you throw at it. That move to boost, while yet another standard for the bike industry to deal with, has been a really great move in terms of making the bikes more reliable, more fun, more accurate. And you really just, that the bike is going to respond in the way that you need it to in the challenging off-road conditions.
So another feature that the eXC2 comes with is a dropper post. And you just said those challenging off-road conditions. If you haven't ridden a dropper post before, these are really interesting. Visually, that sort of looks like a suspension seat post that you might have seen on bikes previously, right? But it's not actually designed for suspension. That is designed with a handlebar button where you press the button on your handlebar, put your weight on the saddle, and the saddle height actually goes down on the fly without you having to dismount the bike. And those are great for these super steep, challenging, twisty, rocky descents because they allow you to lower your center of gravity, get your rear end out further over the rear wheel. And that's a really nice upgrade on the eXC2. And I'm sure Brian will love that those are pre-wired into the frame because they are a wonderful feature that riders love, but it can be a little bit of a hassle routing the cables, and these come already pre-routed, ready to ride.
That is a great feature. I was very happy to see that. Dropper posts are really the number one upgrade that we recommend for folks that have slightly older bikes. They just really change the entire way you ride and the sort of terrain that you can ride. But sneaking those cables through some of the older frames can really be challenging.
For sure.
So it was wonderful to see that included right from the factory.
So here's our eXC2 in action, and you can see a couple of those upgrades in the photo, and I wanted to talk quickly about some of the key differences between the two models. Brian, you can jump in maybe with some talk about how do you help a consumer find the right bike for their needs when they walk into your shop here in a moment. And I think this is probably a pretty common question, right? We have a rider maybe that wants to get into mountain biking for the first time. They see these two bikes that are a couple $100s apart, and they need to make a decision. So how are they going to decide? So compared with the eXC1, that entry point bike, the eXC2 has a couple key upgrades. The first one is that motor produces more torque. So for example, if you're struggling on a very steep uphill climb, Maybe you're out of the saddle, the bike is bouncing around, the rear wheel is just barely maintaining traction and starting to slip. You have just a little more torque that can help you conquer those hills. We talked a little bit about the larger battery. On this style of bike, 499 watt hours is actually already a pretty big battery compared to competing models, but 720 watt hours is a massive battery. So if you want to take a model like this for maybe a wilderness overnight where you want to haul some camping gear out into the backcountry, or maybe you just like to explore and get lost without a map and you're not sure when you roll out of the house how long your ride is going to be, you might benefit from that larger battery. We've got the dropper seat post versus a more traditional rigid seat post. And then I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about the display on your handlebar. On the left is the control pad from the eXC1, which we sometimes call a HMI, human machine interface. And that eXC1 uses an LCD handlebar display with those lights, right? We can see those neon green and neon blue lights. And those show you how much battery charge you have remaining, and they show you which pedal assist level you've selected from the minimum to the maximum, right? On the right side is the display that comes with the eXC2, and it's got a couple more advanced features. So you can see you get that LCD readout with speed and distance and some of those metrics if you're interested in measuring that type of performance. And it's also got a USB port. So through that USB port, you can draw power from your primary e-bike battery, and that could be used to power goodies like a GPS. If you want to carry a GPS into the backcountry with you and you're concerned about the battery life, you can charge your cell phone if you ride out of cell phone range and you want to keep your cell phone topped off. Anything that you can basically drive with a USB 5 volt plug can run off that USB port. A couple upgrades to the drivetrain. These are both 9-speed bikes, but it moves from the Altus to the Shimano Alivio level drivetrain. And then that fork that Brian talked about, right? That 32 and 34 refers to the diameter of the stanchion tubes. So a little bit bigger stanchion tube that's going to give you a little bit more stiffness and control combined with that boost axle spacing. So Brian, somebody walks into Airline Cycles for the first time. Maybe they don't know the brands. Maybe they've never even ridden off-road before, but a buddy loaned them a bike or took them mountain biking for the first time, and they're ready for their first off-road true mountain bike. How do you help them choose the right model for their needs? What kind of questions do you ask in the store?
So a lot of it comes down to the type of terrain that people are going to be riding. There are plenty of people that will be riding on gravel roads, sort of more mellow rails to trails sort of paths, but prefer a mountain bike due to its geometry, due to the comfortable suspension, due to the nice wide tires, and having a little bit of off-road capability in a knobbier tire. There are others that will be riding pretty mellow terrain, but simply prefer the look of the mountain bike. So we look at the type of terrain. Are they likely to be bouncing over rocks and roots and in really technical tight single track, or will they be on more mellow terrain? Anyone who's going to be on more advanced terrain, I think, will really benefit from the use of the dropper. That dropper post is probably a $250 investment by the time you figure in installation and the lever and all that bits. So we're looking at really that price difference. Take $250 right off the top because that dropper is already included. Other things we like to look at, as you mentioned, the suspension fork, having a nice comfortable suspension fork, something that's going to be nice and stiff with the wider stanchions would be certainly a benefit for more rocky, rooty off-road conditions. In addition, having the ability to upgrade the fork, if you're a higher end rider, having that wheel already spaced for a 110 millimeter with that boost spacing is a nice upgrade as well. There's such a variety of different e-bikes out there that really this is a great starting point for people that tend to go for the higher end bikes. They could go with the the eXC2, and then maybe upgrade the fork or maybe upgrade a derailleur and really get a very high-end package with a really competitive price. So a lot of great features in there, and a great platform for more casual riding with the eXC2, more advanced riding eXC1, more advanced riding on the eXC2, and then certainly lots of great opportunities to upgrade if you feel like more of a boutique build.
All right, so let's get into Class 1 e-bikes, which we talked about kind of at the beginning of this call. So Denago sells what we would call compliant e-bikes, right? Class 1, Class 2, 3, Class 3 e-bikes that comply with the laws in the states that have adopted what's called this model legislation. And the model legislation basically is an attempt to standardize the e-bike laws from state to state. So if you're traveling with your e-bike or you're crossing state lines, you can ride with confidence knowing that your bike is legal and appropriate wherever you are. And most, although not all of the states, I believe it's about 40 right now, have adopted this model legislation that defines a Class 1 e-bike as 20-mile-an-hour top speed on pedal assist and without a throttle. And generally, when we're talking about these kind of performance-oriented, enthusiast-level mountain bikes that are designed to be ridden on these off-road trails, those are almost always going to be Class 1 type e-bikes. And the reason is they're kind of the type of e-bike that is the least interruption to some of the trail systems and trail maintenance and trail work, trail access that we already have from like classic analog or acoustic mountain bikes, right? The top speed and the intended use and the trail access is all sort of very similar to a traditional non-e-bike. Depending on where you are in the country, you can look up your local rules, and a great resource for that is the People for Bikes website. It's peopleforbikes.org. They have a great page that you can click on that will give you just click on the name of your state, and they'll give you a printable PDF that has all the e-bike rules that apply to your state. Where can a Class 1, 2, 3 e-bike be ridden? Is there an age limitation? Do you have to wear a helmet? All of those rules at a quick glance. And the reason we've decided to make the eXC 1 and 2 as Class 1 e-bikes is because Class 1 are the type of e-bikes that have the most possible access to these off-road trails and paths, and especially some of what we showed you in the video, right? Those challenging off-road trails like twisty, rocky, rooty single track, which is really fun to ride. Typically, those types of trails are not going to be open to Class 2 and 3 e-bikes. Where e-bikes are permitted, it's almost always going to be a Class 1 e-bike is what's going to be allowed on those types of trail systems. Class 2 and 3 e-bikes, which have higher speeds and sometimes throttles, they're going to have more restrictions on trail access. And they're often restricted to like paved surfaces, car roads, paved paths, as opposed to off-road trails. Brian, what's the scene like in Connecticut? So Connecticut has adopted the model legislation with the Class 1, 2, 3 system, correct?
Yes, we have. It's a little bit of a mix here. Most of the state forests and state parks only allow e-bikes in places where other motorized vehicles are allowed. There are a lot of private or town-owned parks that are available for off-road Class 1 e-bikes. Connecticut also has a number of linear path systems, which our local environmental protection, the Department of Environmental Protection has determined those are all clear for type 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes. Those are generally rails to trails. They're a mixture of paved and crushed stone or gravel. So it really depends on the area. Certain parks are absolutely e-bike friendly, others not so much. And really, you just have to do your local research. In preparation for this presentation, I did some research and tried to figure out what was the common thread throughout all the different states and different, bike meccas, if you will, thinking about places like Bentonville or Asheville, North Carolina, or Moab. And the only thing that's consistent is that every state is totally different. The rules are just all over the place. So really check out your own area, figure out what the rules are, and really just keep in mind, the nice, calm, cool gray minivan that's cruising at 70 miles an hour is not going to have any troubles. The hot rod with music blaring that's swerving all over the place, going 66 miles an hour, might have a problem. Be respectful. Be
think
friendly to other riders.
I think that's a great time to talk about internally at Denago. I often say you should ride where it's safe, legal, and appropriate, right? So
Absolutely.
you have some rule making from land managers, but regardless of what the law says, you also need to ride in a safe and responsible manner, because that's what's going to help preserve trail access for future generations so they can enjoy these same off-road trails. These are some of the places to ride in California where I live. And within about 50 miles of my hometown, I have all of these, right? So I've got a beautiful, what some people might call like a rail trail, right? That's that type 1 bike path, paved typically, that's completely separated from the streets. I've got on-street bike lanes where it's just a piece of paint on the road. We are getting a new Type 3 bike route in town that's going to be a green lane where the bikes have the right of way, but it's restricted to 20 miles an hour, and cars and trucks can still go through, but it's sort of designed primarily with bikes in mind. And then you probably have seen these, what are called in California, cycle track, right? It's a bike lane on the street, but there are concrete bollards or flags or maybe a raised curb that keeps traffic separated. Those are all great types of riding, right? But one of the most type of fun riding is none of those, right? These off-road trails that are really challenging, where you're challenging your bike and your body, that they are not a type 1, 2, 3, 4 bike lane, right? When you are riding on one of these off-road trail systems, Brian made a great point about responsible riding, right? And as an e-bike owner, you need to check in and make sure that you understand what's happening as you move from trail system to trail system, because the land manager often can set their own policy. For example, if you are at a piece of federal land, like a federal national forest, for example, some of those trail systems actually have local rulemaking, right? So instead of one rule that applies to the entire United States, they allow a local land manager or a local ranger to make those decisions about what and where you can ride. So the purpose of this info is not to be a downer. We want you to get out there and ride your bike, but just make sure that you're riding responsibly and that you understand where you can ride your e-bike. And this goes back to the reason that we made Class 1 e-bikes for the eXC1 and eXC2. It's because you're going to have the most possible access to those trail systems. When there is a restriction, it is typically Class 1 e-bikes only, and we want you to be able to ride those trail systems. So this is a link back to that People for Bikes website with the state-by-state laws, and a reminder to ride where it's safe, legal, and appropriate. Wet trail conditions is a problem that we don't typically have here in Southern California, but Brian, I know you do in Connecticut, where you have especially snowpack that then melts. And as a result, trail systems could be closed for days or even weeks. So can you talk a little bit about why people should not be riding when the trails are wet?
It's definitely a huge issue here. And we like to joke here that in Connecticut, it mostly rains on Thursdays, because Thursday is our big group ride night. And I can't tell you how many times we've had to cancel because it's either actively raining, or in some cases we had a big storm the day before. We really rely on an organization called NEMBA, New England Mountain Bike Association, to sort of set the guidance in terms of when it's appropriate to ride. We find that around here, there are definitely some trails that are very sensitive in the 28 or 24 or 48 hours after a significant rain event. So we really we take that pretty seriously, and we cancel rides all the time, reschedule rides, reschedule events in order to get good, safe trail conditions. We spend as a shop and as a club. We have a pretty large bike club that runs out of our shop. We spend a lot of time doing trail maintenance and trying to keep things in nice, safe conditions. And much as media and sort of some of the outdoor extreme shows like to show people blasting through thick, muddy areas, and boy, it was a blast. We came home and the bike's just covered in mud. Chances are, if that's happening, then you were riding in areas that you shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And much like the different laws are vary from place to place, conditions at off-road riding areas vary quite a bit. We have a few steep sections with very sandy soil that drain incredibly well. Those are the places we go right after the big rainstorms, and stay away from other more sensitive areas. So know your terrain, know your laws, and in all cases, ride when and where it's appropriate.
It's highly localized, right? So
Absolutely.
just literally within 10 miles of my house, my home base, I have Chino Hills State Park. And Chino Hills State Park has that clay-based soil. And after a big rain in Southern California, they will sometimes close the park for 4 or 5 days. And in 10 miles in the other direction, we have trails that are completely like stone and decomposed granite. You could ride that trail in the rain and you will not even leave a tire mark. No one will ever know that you are know that you were there. So pay attention to your local land manager. They're not trying to put a damper on your fun. If they're saying that this trail is closed due to wet conditions, there's probably a good reason why that you should be aware of.
It's especially important in areas where you have fairly long freeze and thaw cycles. Connecticut, we have bad weather somewhere around 11 and a half months a year. And most of that time, it feels like the area is freezing and thawing on a daily basis. Not quite that bad, but you get someone that's irresponsible and goes out and puts down some big ruts. Well, that area might freeze that night and not thaw for days or even weeks. When that happens, everyone else is riding on frozen trails that should be pretty nice, but instead we have these big ruts that are hard as concrete.
Absolutely.
Really make the riding unsafe, unpleasant, and they leave those scars that every other hiker or equestrian sees and thinks poorly of mountain bikers because of that.
Yep. One bad actor can sort of ruin the efforts of 99 people doing trail work and advocacy, right? So I've got on screen here, this is an example of the People for Bikes one-page summary with the e-bike laws state by state. I pulled up Connecticut as an example because that's Brian's home state. If you have not seen this document for your state, I would really encourage you to go pull a copy. It's a great reference and a great reminder. And if you're sharing e-bikes or loaning your bike to a friend or taking somebody out on a trail or a path system for the first time, it's a great orientation that you can use to quickly bring them up to speed with what they need to know about e-bikes in your state. So let's talk about availability. We showed these bikes for the first time at the Sea Otter show in the springtime, and it's really exciting to be able to get them to market where we can share them with others for the first time. So these are available at your local Denago dealer today. If you have not been into your local Denago dealer bike shop, I would highly encourage you to make that visit. There are now more than 250 Denago partner locations across the United States that are open, and they do test rides and sales and preventive maintenance, and they put on clinics. That local bike shop that's a Denago dealer is a great place to learn about where to ride. And bike shop owners and managers like Brian, they're committed to helping you find the right bike for your needs, to put you on something that's going to fit your body well and has the right features for the trail systems that you plan to ride on. And they're available at denago.com. So if you happen to be logged into this live stream from an area where you're not near a Denago dealer, we'd be happy to set you up with one directly. But we're really working hard to fill out that dealer map. I think if you're near a population center, you probably have a great Denago dealer right in your backyard.
And if you don't, go talk to your friendly local bike shop and encourage them to call Denago. As a shop owner, I just can't tell you what a great experience I've had working with these guys. For a long time, I carried another brand, and brand that you see advertised on Facebook all the time. They sold a customer a $2,000 e-bike. 2 weeks later, the charger died. That customer was out without a charger for 4 months because they already had his money. They didn't care. They waited for the next shipment of bikes to come in and chargers to come in rather than opening a box and giving this poor guy a charger. That's when I dropped that company and I found Denago. Customer service has been just, frankly, they're making every other bike company look bad. The quality of service is so high. So if you have a good local shop, please tell them to go talk to Denago. Great people and great bikes.
We really appreciate that. Thanks for the recommendation. And, we love to hear from consumers too. So if you click on that map and you happen to be in a location where we don't have a Denago dealer in your market, but you have a great local bike shop that you already have a relationship, please do reach out. We would love to take your recommendation, and that goes a long way in terms of our own outreach. And we would be happy to call or reach out to them and see if we can set them up.
And just to make it clear, I am not a Denago employee. I am not part of the company. I am just a really happy dealer. Have your local shop call me directly. I'll talk all day about this company. Great stuff.
That's a great distinction that I think leads us perfectly into one of our questions that I want to answer from someone who's watching the live stream. If you joined us late, we are taking your questions and comments. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., go ahead and drop a question or a comment just as a reply onto that live video, and we'll see it on our screen here, and we can answer that for you before we wrap up. This person chose to remain anonymous, which is fine. I wanted to bring up the point, Brian, that Denago is not the Apple Store business model, right? So if you think of the Apple Store in your community, Denago does not own the bike shops in your community that are Denago dealers. They are independently owned and operated businesses with owners like Brian, who choose what they want to carry in their local bike shop, and they have chosen to carry, Denago e-bikes. But I think that's an important distinction, right? When you walk into the Apple Store, Apple controls the entire experience, and it can be sort of sterile, and they all look the same, and it's a little bit different, right? Each of your local Denago dealers is a local expert in their local market. We have a comment from this user that wanted to know why certain accessories aren't available at dealers, right? I bought my bike from a dealer and they don't have this particular accessory. And I can certainly answer part of that. Each of these dealers, first of all, is an independent business, and they have to decide which items they think are going to be the best fit for their market. And sometimes that means shops might bring in certain pieces of the Denago line, and we allow dealers that flexibility. So Brian, for example, does a lot of mountain bike business at his shop. He'll have the new eXC 1 and 2 available there. And I don't know if I speak out of turn. I can't see your sales for Brian, but I don't think you do the beach cruiser model, as far as I know, right? So
East Hampton is nothing but hills, and frankly, the geometry of the beach cruisers around here just doesn't make it the perfect bike.
Yeah. So
we don't do that, but we do a ton of the other models.
The flip side of that is if you walk into a beachfront community with a boardwalk where it's flat, you're probably going to see that your dealer has selected bikes that work well in that local market, right? Which could be the beach cruiser, which is designed for that flatter riding on the oceanfront path. So, if you bought a bike and you're having trouble getting an accessory, feel free to reach out to us. You can email cs@denago.com or call us anytime. Obviously, we can ship any accessory to your home. But your dealer needs to hear that feedback too. So if you're looking for a particular accessory for your e-bike and you don't see it on the shelf, I'm sure any of your Denago dealers would be happy to order an accessory on demand for you, for sure. Brian, I'm going to open it up to any final questions or comments. Last call for anybody that wants to get their question on the air. While we wait for that, Brian, any parting comments before we adjourn?
I'll tell you, if you're on the fence, if you're a longtime biker and you're thinking about adding an e-bike to your stable, I just can't encourage it enough. Personally, I'm a shop owner, so I don't get to ride as often as I like. I'm asthmatic and I'm allergic to just about everything. Add in the fact that I sponsor a pretty big cycling team. That means that in addition to being asthmatic and wheezing and don't have enough miles under my belt, I also have very fast friends. Having an e-mountain bike has changed my life in terms of who I ride with, where I ride. And oftentimes, I have a group ride that starts at 6:30 and I may be finishing up with customers at 6:10, even though the shop is closed. Days when I don't want to ride, I grab my e-bike. Within 10 minutes, I've got a smile on my face and I'm always glad that I've ridden. But if I had to face those first couple hills without any support, being exhausted from a long, hard day, I might choose to skip that ride. So it's absolutely been a game changer for me. And I really encourage everyone to give it a shot. It's not
E-bikes,
cheating. It's just a different way of riding.
they really are the great equalizer. They allow
Absolutely.
people of different abilities or different skill levels or different fitness levels to all ride together. And that's probably a great place to close. This is my buddy Wilt. And when we shot the photos for these models, I hadn't seen him in a year or two. And it was just a great way to get out into the wilderness and reconnect, breathe some fresh air. And after 20 minutes of riding, it's pretty hard to not have a smile on your face. It's a great
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. I really appreciate you being here, Brian. Thank you for taking the
Thank
time.
you.
Any questions or comments about these new models, please send us an email, cs@denago.com, and we'll get back to you right away. And thank you for watching us.